Welcome back to Ask Dad. On today's video, we're talking about choosing an internet connection. This may happen when you buy a new home or when you move into a new apartment. You have to choose all of your utilities, of course, and choosing an internet service is one of the more confusing things to do. There's so many numbers and details and things people throw at you. Some of them matter, some of them don't. So let's get into it today and talk about what is it that you need to be looking at when choosing an internet connection. Let me turn on my screen here real quick. And there's a few different factors that you need to understand when you're looking at internet services. The first one is latency. The second one, packet loss. The third one, jitter. And the fourth one is bandwidth speed. Now, bandwidth speed is what most people talk about all of the time when they're talking about an internet service provider or a connection. They say, I have 1 gigabit service, or I get 300 megabits down, or I have the newest 2 gig service and fiber internet connection. And what does that mean? Well, there's two real important pieces here and then a few pieces that go into it. The bandwidth speed is what everyone talks about. So for example, if you're looking at an Xfinity mobile plan, the bandwidth would be the 150 megabits per second or the 2 gigabit service or 2000 megabit service. And everyone looks at this top number and says, well, it's more, so it should be better. It must be faster if it's 2 gigabit service. And what the 2 gigabit really is talking about is the bandwidth, the capacity. Let's look at it like a freeway. It's 2 gigabits would be, well, we have a 5-lane highway or 5-lane freeway. That's better than a 1.5-lane freeway. And while that is partially true, that only matters if you can actually get traffic through that freeway quickly. That comes to the second piece of this that your internet service provider will very rarely tell you, and it's the latency. The latency is the speed limit or how fast that traffic can get through there. And if there's any congestion in the network, will it get through there faster or slower than it's actually allowed to get through? So some of the congestion that you can see on networks, for example, are Xfinity cable companies. So that would be Xfinity, Charter, Sparklight, different companies that operate over cable type, the coax networks. They usually use what's called a pooled connection. So you may have super fast service when you're at home and everyone else is at work, but when other people get home, they're using that same bandwidth, and your network connection starts to constrict because you have more and more individuals using that same connection. As opposed to DSL, which DSL would be a direct connection. So if you get a bandwidth that's allocated to you, that's allocated to you regardless. Fiber internet's going to vary depending on the provider, but fiber usually offers a lot more bandwidth overall, so your connection speed should be better. Latency can be caused by a few different things. It could be caused by issues on the line where there's some sort of a corrosion or other issues where it's not able to get back and forth. It can be caused by the other end. So maybe you're trying to connect to Netflix, but Netflix is having a system issue or they've got too many people coming in and pulling stuff off of their server. And now you're not able to get the full speed, not because your internet service provider isn't working, it's because the Netflix server may be having issues or whoever it is that you're trying to connect to. That can cause packet loss, or packet loss can be caused by a few different other things. Jitter is the consistency of the packets going back and forth, and we're not going to get too much into how an internet connection works because that would be a whole separate video, maybe a whole series of videos. But when you're looking at internet connections, you need to understand the bandwidth speed is only one of the pieces, and it's not as important as you might think. So let's look at this other page that we're seeing here. And this particular one I just looked up because Netflix is something that a lot of people do, whether it's Netflix, YouTube, Paramount, HBO Max, it doesn't matter. The important factor is understanding that what you are doing with your internet connection determines how much of an internet connection you need or how much bandwidth you need. So, for example, here it talks about on streaming platforms like Netflix or YouTube, you need per connection, meaning per TV or per device that is connected to that service, you need 3 to 5 megabits per second of download speed. So let's take a look at this Xfinity plan that we were looking at here. 150 megabits per second is their lowest plan. They'll deter you from getting it. They'll tell you need faster speeds, all of that, but it depends on what you're doing. So if you only need 3 to 5 megabits per second of download, per device that you're connecting, and this is for standard definition, not ultra high HD, but you would only need 3 to 5 megabits per second of download speed. Do you need a 2 gigabit for connection for 2 people at home? Well, probably not. Let's step it up. Let's say you want to stream something in 4K Ultra HD. First thing is you need a 4K TV. A lot of people don't have those yet. An 8K TV is the next thing we're talking about, but let's keep it here. For a full 4K Ultra HD, you'll need a minimum of 25 megabits per second. Well, if you have, let's say you've got 4 people in your house or 4 TVs in your house that are going to stream 4 HD Ultra 4K TV shows at the same time, you would need around 100 megabits per second. Give yourself a little latitude. Maybe you want to say, let's double that so that we make sure we've got enough for the people that are streaming social media on their phones while they're watching TV. Well, then that would max you out again. 4 TVs running this, giving yourself a cushion, you would only need 200 megabits per second. And that's doubling what we're actually showing here. Well, if you're talking to Xfinity, they may say, well, we want to push the 2 gig plan because that's the fastest and the best we have. You may very well be able to say, well, based on the calculation, I only need 300 megabits per second, and you can save yourself here a fair amount of money, $90 per month. Now, if we click into here, we'll want to see what that actually entails, and on the Xfinity site, it actually gives you some good data. The 300 megabit per second plan, in this specific instance, let's go down here, and it talks about the speed you'll actually get. Your typical download speed would be 351 megabits per second, 114 upload speed. I'll get to why that's important here in a second. And your typical latency based on their numbers are 16 milliseconds. That should be fast enough for any gaming, streaming, uploading, Zoom calls, voice over internet type protocols that you would ever want to do. Now, here's an interesting thing. Your data cap is 1.2 terabits. That should be enough for most people. However, if you are streaming for Ultra HD 4K TV shows at the same time, you may go over that. And that's what you'll need to do some quick math on and figure out how often do we watch TV, what does that really look like? Or you can simply upgrade to unlimited data on customer-owned modems for $30 a month. So instead of your connection being $30 per month, you're now up to $60 per month if you own your own modem, and you can still save yourself a significant money over this plan. So those are some of the data details that you need to be watching for. Other things that you do need to make sure that you're checking out is understand that you're not going to get the full connection speed. There's always some sort of a delay in between. So the 300 megabits or the 351 megabits per second that we're talking about, that is from the Comcast hub to the point of service, usually basically where it connects into your connection. Every connection point that you have, if you have a modem, that's going to slow your connection down a little bit. If you have a router, if you have a switch, if you have other networking devices, if you have like that whole home Wi-Fi where it goes from one device to another, all of that slows your connection down a little bit. And those are factors that you'll still need to factor in. But understanding you've got 300 megabits per second, you still have a little bit of latitude that gives you some room to lose that speed. Your typical upload speeds. Upload speeds are critical, something that you'll need to watch out for. So for example, if you come over here to CenturyLink, this is a CenturyLink. I just picked a random address in the Kent, Washington area, which is south of Seattle. And in this particular area, they're operating still on DSL. They'll offer you a 15 megabit per second connection. That's a far cry from that 300 that we were looking at before. But here's where it gets really tricky. It's 15 megabits per second download. It's 750 kilobits per second upload. That's less than 1 megabit per second. And in a lot of scenarios, if you are doing any voice over internet, if you're uploading any data, that connection is too slow to support multiple services at the same time. And sometimes it's actually too slow to even do we were using GoToMeeting at the time, which is like a Zoom, and it's too slow to even have a consistent Zoom connection, especially if you're doing any data streaming over that connection, like we would use Google Earth to be representing different data points that we were looking at. So make sure you understand the connection that you're getting. And in this type of a scenario, 15 megabits per second is already ridiculously slow. your 750 kilobits per second will make it so you can't do any of the data stream that you may want. If you're doing gaming, you may not be able to upload what you're trying to do quick enough to be able to actually survive your game. You may lose the game because you just don't have a good enough internet connection. So when you look out there, there are a bunch of different types of plans. So here's Sparklight. They're providing a cable type connection in some of the more rural areas. Things to look at on these connections are, is unlimited data actually included? So in this particular case, it says unlimited data included on a 300 megabits per second plan, but after 5 terabits of data, speeds may be slowed for network management. You'll run into that a lot on throttling on cellular connections. So for example, Verizon Home Internet, T-Mobile Home Internet. In those a lot of cases on the cellular providers, they're using their home internet because it's basically a supplemental service that they use for excess capacity. So if their cellular network is hit under heavy use by people using cell phones, it will actually slow down their home internet users because they don't want to take it away from the cell phones. And T-Mobile will tell you that right in their terms of service. So make sure again that you understand the types of services you're looking. If I'm looking at the quality of services, I would look at number one, the fiber networks. Those are going to be the fastest, most reliable networks. After that, it goes to the cable networks because they usually have the highest speeds. They've got more bandwidth in their networks, and they generally will be a much more consistent network, second to the fiber networks. Then you get into the tier 3, as I would look at them, and those would be the DSLs, the over-the-air networks, the people that put a dish on your house, and even the cellular providers, the Verizon Home Internet, T-Mobile Home Internets, and then they go down from there. But when you're looking at it, take a look first at the speeds, the 300, the 1 gigabit, the 2 gigabit services, but understand what it is that you actually need, and then buy the service tier that is slightly above that. So if you need 100 megabits per second, maybe you buy a 200, 250 megabits per second download. If you need 200 megabits per second, a 300 service would work for you. All of these are different factors that go into it. And then finally, understand that you will not get what you pay for. And what I mean by that is I'm on a 300 megabit per second plan. And if I test my internet like you see me doing here, I have a couple of different networking devices in front of my connection. So I have the modem, I've got a router, and then it goes to a secondary router for where I'm currently at. And on my 300 megabits per second plan, I can see I actually need to reset my modem because I'm only getting 91 megabits per second, but it does slow down. Latency, there's different types of latency, unloaded and loaded. We're not going to get into those in this video. And then you can see my upload speed runs at 21 megabits per second. This is still very fast for what I'm doing, and it'll cover all of the details that I need it to do. But you do have to understand that you will not get the full service at any point generally where you're at. You will always have some sort of a drop in service. Finally, how do you know who to go with? Well, after you've kind of looked into these details, ask your neighbors. They're the ones that are using the services. They're the ones that understand what the hiccups are. They can tell you if Comcast is not good in one location, if Charter or Xfinity or Sparklight or Spectrum, is good in another location. They're the ones that have the real life data points. So talk to your neighbors, figure out what they're using right then choose the plan that may be best for you. Thanks for being here. If this video has been helpful, please feel free to put a like down below. If this is the kind of content that you would like to see more of, subscribe to the channel. And if you know someone who may benefit from this type of content, please consider sharing the video with them. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.